Hi, I'm Rachel, and this is my Am reading video for Friday, January 17th, 2020. Hoping to make this pretty quick. Don't have a lot to talk about, just one completed book this week, really. It's this one, We Were Strangers Once by Betsy Carter. I read this for my book club, which is meeting at the end of the month. This is a 1930s immigration novel, primarily following around a bunch of German Jews who made it out of the country pretty much in time. So there's a little bit of, lead up to the Holocaust in the background. They experienced some violence in Germany and are worried about their families that are still there. But for the most part, they're just living their lives in America and dealing with what it means to have come from a place of affluence in Germany to being these lower class citizens and all their professional degrees don't help them here, and they kind of start at the bottom. It's kind of like a immigration story that has similarities and differences to what immigration is like today and how it is to try to acclimate to a new culture where you don't speak the language and the skills aren't as easily recognized. Our primary character is called Egon, who was a doctor and works in a deli basically when he comes here, and he ends up trying to do some veterinary work on the side, and he meets an Irish immigrant who also has an affinity for animals, and they have a flirtation romance going on. Gets him into a little bit of trouble when he becomes a little bit of a local celebrity about, his friend tries to buff him up as, an immigrant doing good things in America and, not being a weird foreigner, but he's, operating without a license and, he's not a citizen, so, it could be that he could be dragged in front of IRS and get deported to Germany. Not great. But really the stakes in this are not necessarily all that high. We're just following these individuals trying to make their way. I feel like the story isn't anything superb or unusual. I mean, it's a serviceable story about, interesting run-of-the-mill characters in this setting. I'm sure that we'll have a lot to talk about in a book club setting because there's lots of different people to follow and issues that crop up here and there. But well, I decided to give it a 3.5 and experiment with giving slightly lower star ratings to books that aren't necessarily all that impressive. I mean, it's fine. It's a good book. It's a decent book, but it's, nothing extraordinary. So I thought, 3.5. Next, I am still in the middle of The Bluest Eye by Toni Morrison, although I had hoped to have it completed long before now. There's been a little bit of conversation in the Toni Morrison Voxer group, or at least some really interesting comments that I want to go over again after I make more headway. I've just started the winter portion, the second portion in this seasonal story. I'd say it's primarily about two girls of an age with one another, and in similar circumstances to a certain degree, two rural black girls from, I guess, mid-century, 20th century America, Claudia and Peccola, from two different families. And Peccola's family is a bit more ne'er-do-well, I guess. I can already tell there's going to be problems with the father in that one. Morrison's characters, they leap off the page. The dialogue is just so fresh and present. You can just sort of hear these characters talking like they're next to you. Like there was this whole segment where Peccola is visiting some prostitutes who live nearby, and it was just, you were in the room with these people and their quirky commentary. I mean, it wasn't just, quirky for the sake of quirk. They felt real. So I'm very optimistic, starting with Morrison's debut and to see where her writing career goes from here. I mean, I'm not too surprised. I pretty much figured that a Nobel Prize winner and a Pulitzer Prize winner would, be impressive. So far it's fitting the bill. I will report back when I finish. I am also in the middle of an audiobook, The Collapsing Empire by John Scalzi. I decided to go ahead and take the plunge and go into Audible, even though, it's, I don't know, it's not necessarily cheap even for Amazon Prime users. Right now I'm using the, free promo one, and I think I might be able to get a little bit of a discount as a Prime user, and I don't think I'll keep it for long, but I've been so curious about The Collapsing Empire, and it's only available through Audible, so I figured if any investment is worth it, then maybe that one, and I'll just try to get the rest through the library. The books I want to, get on audiobook, I try to get them through the library most of the time. Anyway, this is a space drama taking place several centuries into the future when humanity has left the Earth and they've discovered this natural phenomenon called the flow so that they can travel light years relatively quickly. Like it could take several months or a couple years rather than, lifetimes. And they colonize a bunch of planets that are connected through the flow, and they call it the interdependency. They have an emperor, which I think I said as emperox in an earlier video, and a bunch of guilds and sort of a religious order that came out of this. Interesting world building, really. I don't think Scalzi goes into a whole lot of detail about it, but enough to make me happy. He has a bunch of snarky characters, maybe perhaps a little too snarky, or maybe Will Wheaton, the narrator, is getting a little too into it. I mean, he's a great actor, and you can just tell how much the characters come alive in his voice, but a couple of them in particular are maybe a little over the top. And we are dealing with the perhaps intergalactic travesty here, because it seems like the flow is collapsing in on itself. And that would really leave the empire in shambles, and these kind of planets would be cut off from each other forever, and they wouldn't all have the proper resources to go on their own. So maybe humanity could be in trouble, but, political intrigues. That's what, the politicians always care about most. So yeah, it took a little while for me to get into it. I think there's so many weird names, and I never really liked pirates that much, and we started off with space pirates, but once we got more into the political machinations and into family drama, those are more my sweet spots, and so it's starting to come together for me. I think I'll finish this one up relatively quickly. Next on the docket, I returned to my failed page 112 tag. I was thinking of starting a whole year of page 112 tags, starting with 6 books that have been on my Goodreads TBR for years. And as in the past, I would use the page 112 tag where I'd read and compare page 112 of 2 books. I'd use that and then, decide to go with one book and, discard the other book. But I've decided not to do that in this case because I have my 6 books, but I've decided on my own that I just prefer 3 of them over the other 3. Later in the year, I'll be doing page 112 tags for other books in other ways. But anyway, next on the docket, well, these were the 2 books I was going to use page 112 tag on. The first one here is The Love Affairs of Nathaniel P. by Adele Waldman, which, just going off of the description, seems a bit too much like, male deals with ennui sort of stuff. I mean, it doesn't really interest me as much. This one is The Gallery of Vanished Husbands by Natasha Solomons, and it is about flailing marriages within London Orthodox Jewish society about well, I want to say 50 years ago, but that's because I think it's still 2000, so 70 years ago. So I almost feel like now we can actually call this historical fiction, right? 70 years? That's a significant amount of time ago. Certainly we're banking on society being a little bit different then. Yeah, I'm going to go with this one. Sooner or later, anyway. And I guess that about covers it for me now. I'm coming upon a 3-day weekend. It is Martin Luther King Jr. weekend here in the U.S. to commemorate the civil rights leader who is so renowned. My synagogue does a special MLK Shabbat service every year with the local black church and gospel choir, and it's always a lot of fun and inspiring, so I'm looking forward to going to that. And I might also be going to see Little Women with a friend if the weather in the DC area cooperates. But I'm also hoping to do a fair bit of reading and writing. I didn't get as far in the goals that I wanted to last weekend. So much for, feeling breezy about all of this reading stuff. I don't know, I just have this monthly TBR and I'm definitely behind. Goodreads tells me so with my yearly reading goal. I'm not sure why I'm putting all this pressure on myself, especially when I'm enjoying the books. Should be easy to just sit down and read, I think, but maybe I'm just, honing in on myself too much and sort of self-sabotaging. But anyway, I've gone ahead and jotted out some sort of to-do lists for myself, particularly with writing goals, and so I'm hoping I can cross things off and feel productive, and that's all you can hope for, really. So I hope you all are also banking on productive and or fun weekends coming up. Thanks so much for watching, everyone, and I'll see you next time.